So good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Welcome back to anyone who was with us last week for our Taking Outdoor Play Seriously webinar. My name is Bernadette McCann, and I'm a Play Participation Officer here at PlayBoard, and it is my pleasure to welcome you all to our COVID-19 and Planning for Summer webinar. Joining us this morning, we have Sinead McCusker, a Play Development Officer, Reid Duffy, a Play Participation Officer, and Kathy Toner, a Senior Social Worker for the Early Years team within the South Eastern Trust. Just to go over some housekeeping this morning, to help minimise any interference we might have, we would ask that you put your mics on mute and turn your cameras off. We would encourage you to interact using the chat function at the bottom of the screen. And if you have any questions, please submit these into the chat. Apologies in advance if we don't get to all of your questions because of time constraints, but we will try our best to get through as many as we can. For the purpose of this recording, the guidance that we will be referring to throughout is version 3 COVID-19 guidance for childcare settings. At the end of today's webinar, you will receive a link which will take you to a number of resources which we hope you will find useful. So for the format of today's webinar, we will have a presentation delivered by Sinead, followed by a panel discussion formed by your questions, and we will finish off by sharing the link to our resource pack. Before I hand you over to Sinead, I would like to take this opportunity to tell you about a piece of work that we are progressing for the Education Authority. Some of you might have already seen it or heard of it. It's called the Children and Young People Survey Impact of COVID-19. It's a survey aimed at capturing the experiences of children and young people aged 5 to 18 in Northern Ireland. And it really focuses on hearing children's experiences of play, education, and life in general during lockdown. We have had over 400 responses so far, which is fantastic. And the survey is open for another week. So if any of you have children, please encourage them to take part. And Jimmy will share the link with you to that on the chat. So in terms of some early analysis that we would like to share with you, hopefully this will give you a snapshot into some of the things that children have been doing and the fears they have about life after lockdown, all of which are very important for you to consider when reopening your setting. The majority, over 80% of the children surveyed to date, are of primary school age. In terms of the types of play that children are engaging in, we are seeing a decline in physical, outdoor and social play, and an increase in the use of technology. The survey has also revealed some worries that children have. One little boy added that he was worried no one would remember him. Lots of children reported that they were scared of contracting and spreading the virus. And children also have concerns about returning to settings, the use of PPE, and the separation of friendship groups between pods or bubbles. When we asked the children what would help make those transitions a little easier, they said more playtime. They said the use of keep in touch sessions, which will allow children to see the changes and the settings in advance, and some time to be set aside for children to get to know each other again. We look forward to sharing all of the findings with you in the future, and we would appreciate again if you know of any children or if you have any children, please encourage them to take part in our survey. And I will hand you over to Sinead. Thank you very much. Sorry, I just think Sinead needs to unmute herself and turn her video on for us. That would be great.
Sorry folks, I'm on my way. Some technical assistance from Jimmy.
Don't worry, Sinead, working from home, the joys. We've all experienced this. I'm sure plenty of people in our attendance have also experienced it. No problem.
I'm sure we can make a start. You can hear me, Bernadette?
Yes, we can hear you. We just can't see you. That's perfect, Sinead. Thank you.
Okay. As we approach the easing of lockdown restrictions and the reopening of our play-based childcare, we are faced with the public health guidelines that must be adhered to. While we recognise the need to come out of lockdown slowly with certain measures in place, we also acknowledge the challenges these present for play workers when planning a programme for the summer play scheme. In PlayBoard, we hope today's presentation will offer the play workforce support and planning for play for children over the summer months. Children that have been in lockdown for over probably close to 4 months now anyway, most likely missing their friends and peers and having had different play experiences during this time. I know it is not how you normally do business when planning for your summer schemes that are usually well in place by now. It's usually around Easter time when you're booking buses, planning trips, putting applications into small funding, and really well organised ahead of the game. Instead, you've been busy coping with restrictions, carrying out risk assessments to ensure the safe return for your children and staff. So a whole different approach. Today's session focuses on what you can still provide for play under the current circumstances. We aim to support play workers and providers in their endeavour to reopen within the constraints of COVID-19. PlayBoard have already delivered 2 webinars previously, and one on risk assessment and one on the COVID-19 policy. This one really is to focus on the play now that will take place within the restrictions. I'm going to highlight the benefits of play in helping children's recovery in relation to all aspects of their health and well-being. And we're going to provide you with some useful resources that Bernadette just mentioned, and we'll share them as we go through the presentation. The Health and Social Care Trust Guidelines, the version 3, highlights that the guidance notes do not affect the legal obligations of providers with regards to health and safety with the public health advice. Providers must continue to adhere to the minimum standards and take regard of the public health advice. So you're injecting the new guidelines within your framework you already work from. Just to do a quick reflection of what was included in the risk assessments in your COVID-19 policies. Invention and prevention control, using your outdoor space to full capacity, and this is highlighted through all the research and evidence that we're seeing, use the outdoors more. Group size and restricted numbers, play pods, we're going to look at them in more detail. Staff social distancing within their play pods, and again the guidelines are changing almost weekly, so keep up to date with what they're saying. Helping children and young people understand the public health measures. The guidelines have provided lovely child-friendly ways to do this. Good communication with parents. Drop-off, pick-up, deliveries to the setting. You might want to stagger these and make other arrangements. Shared spaces and resources. How are you going to share spaces? How are you going to ensure there's enough resources for each play pod? Transport arrangements. If a child or member of staff becomes sick. The use of PPE. And good personal hygiene routines and resources. Required maintenance of premises and your equipment. So there was a lot for you to have to deal with before you even thought about welcoming the children back. In regards to the play pods, the guidelines say that they should be as small as possible with a maximum of 12 children per pod. This has implications for your settings, and that normally you would work with 2 adults to 16 children. Children and adults will remain in the same small group. They can't mix with another play pod. A record to be retained each day on the people within the pod. And this is probably more for tracing purposes if somebody's to become unwell, that they could trace it back to that particular group of people. Children and adults are encouraged to maintain social distance where possible. That will change for everyone. Some of the preventative measures that need to be ongoing as well. Minimising contact with those who are unwell, promoting good hand hygiene, both with staff and with the children. Respiratory hygiene, if you have to be indoors, make sure there's good ventilation, open windows and doors if possible. Cleaning frequently touched surfaces, continuing general cleaning with detergent. A little tip for you, if you're doing your hard surfaces cleaning, spray onto the cloth and not onto the hard surface. Using equipment that can be cleaned or disposed of, minimising contact between children, peers and staff, and use of partitions where necessary. And I think partitions are required if you have 2 pods or more sharing the same room. There's details of what this should look like in your guidelines. So play, after having to worry about all that and risk assessments and your COVID-19 policies, you have to start thinking about the play and how it's going to help your children ease back into your settings. Playing is central to children's physical, mental, social and emotional health and well-being. And it is enshrined within the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, Article 31. Play allows children to develop their inner resources and build resilience to the difficulties and uncertainties they experience through crisis. It's the most natural way to help children to, I always say, it helps them to work stuff out, to sort stuff out. And it also helps to give them the coping skills when they find themselves out of their comfort zone or indeed within this crisis. Play is natural, active, and often is a natural, active, and often unplanned process in which thinking, feeling, and doing can flourish. When children are playing, they are able to be inventive, creative, and they learn to self-regulate. Play in crises. Playing helps children stay physically and mentally well. It's an everyday part of a healthy and happy childhood. Play is just as important during a crisis like the current coronavirus pandemic. It helps your child to manage their emotions and maintain a sense that everything is and can be okay. So children are going to need a lot of reassurance in helping them to settle back in. Some children could be frightened, some kids will be delighted to get back and see everybody, and some could have anxiety or underlying issues. In situations of conflict or disaster, opportunities for play have a significant therapeutic and rehabilitative role in helping children recover a sense of normality and joy after experience of loss, dislocation and trauma. None of us really know what children are bringing back through your doors. Utilising the outdoor space within the setting and allowing children time to play freely, reconnect with friends, staff and adjust to their club should be a priority for children's emotional well-being as they return to childcare. You might want to think about, the children are easing back in, creating a time or a part of the day for reflection. You could do it through informal discussions and conversations, or for the younger children, maybe have some activities based around how they're feeling, what it was like during lockdown for them, what were the good things, as well as maybe some of the issues they're bringing back with them. Planning for play. To ensure balance and breadth of play provision resides, play workers need to have a clear understanding of their role in meeting the required guidelines, while at the same time providing quality play opportunities. I have a bit of a fear that with all the restrictions and all the time that's had to go in to just getting your doors reopened, the play might have fell by the wayside or might become too sterile within the environments that we're having to create. The primary focus should be to support and facilitate the play process by enabling children to determine the control and the intent of their play within the play pods. So while the play pods themselves are restrictive, and there will be an allocated space, which is probably another restriction for play, while children are within their area and within their play pods, try to ensure that there's still child-led agenda. Working with children to create a playful ethos to the setting, a play culture that is responsive to the needs of the children. The design and the resourcing of the physical environment is crucial. You are having to remove a lot of your soft toys and things that may be easier to transfer or transmit an infection, but make sure that you're replacing them with things that can be used. So PlayBoard have developed this little checklist as a means of helping you and your staff to put measures in place and to make sure that they are in place. The little details that sometimes it's easier to forget until you come across them. We recommend that using the checklist will help develop knowledge of what changes need to be in place, what resources can remain on offer. Actively involve children in the ongoing planning when they return. So once the kids are back through your door, go back to our practice of the children being involved in informing your weekly plans and activities. Ensure all staff involved have clear understanding of their roles and responsibilities for the health and safety of the children and staff. And I think that's a crucial point, that managers or leaders don't carry out these checklists for planning, but that it's a whole staff approach so that everybody's singing off the same hymn sheet. Help consider the services that are currently affected by the restrictions. So here's what it looks like. There is one of these available within your resource pack. I'm probably not going to read them all out because it would be board silly, but I'll pull a few things out for you. For example, how do we plan to manage resources across our play areas? Which resources and play areas are not permitted? Will children have accessibility to resources agreed independently? Do we need to use bunting or cones to cordon off the different play spaces? So this will help you to sort of identify and address those little details of helping your setting to remain a playful, child-friendly, inviting place. And things as simple that you might not have considered yet. Water. You know, water, is it going to be water bottles, plastic cups? Children have their own for both staff and children. And the weather as well. What if it rains? What will we do? Will outdoor play still go ahead? What does it say in your play policy? What can we do in preparation for all kinds of weather? What do we need to inform parents and children about the different kinds of weather? So it's putting all those considerations before you start business. Have your plan. As well as that, we have devised a weekly planner and created a sample. The one that we would work from, it's quite less paperwork, I suppose. I've had to divide this into two parts just to be able to share on the screen. So this bit that I have up on the screen now would normally be across the top of your template. We have taken things out that normally would be in there because of the virus. And that list that I have, that's your usual role play, arts and crafts, wipeable books, maybe limit the number of books within the play pods, dolls, large blocks, junk art materials. So we've given some thought about what you could still offer. This should be along the top of your program plan, and the project should add in as comprehensive list as possible to show what a wide range of activities remains available daily. And then this bit, the Monday through to Friday, I call this the add-ons. Excuse me. I call this the add-ons. And as you can see down the side, there's indoor activities, indoor and then outdoor. Something different every day to keep the momentum and the enthusiasm for the kids, and a variety. This might also be a good opportunity to give them a little bit of things that you've had to remove because of the COVID on individual trays, for example, sculpture and modelling. So you need clay, water, if you give kids a little bit of clay in a plastic container, for example, that is their own piece of clay, and then you can do away with it at the end of your session. Children may sometimes engage with these or may not, but the good practice is having different choices on offer. At the bottom of it, you can see there is a little evaluation box, and this is really useful. Good practice to evaluate and monitor your play, but as well as that, this is a very simple way for recording it. Again, cutting down on your paperwork. And it's really just to capture how the play session has went, to feed into your forward planning. You can also, if you want, get children to feed into your evaluation using post-its or whatever way works for you. So simple things like went well, could have done with more clay. Most of the kids joined in, and the scavenger hunt. So you would do that again. Then you might have regards to the obstacle indoor course. Space not really big enough, we'll use smaller items next time. Kids love the den building, some great picks. So it's a really nice way of you capturing what works well and what doesn't, and then making the changes required. Participation. We talked at the beginning there about Article 31 and children's rights to play. At the core of all the work PlayBoard does, you'll also hear us talking about Article 12, which is the voice of the child. So how are the children involved with your programme plan? Do you gather evidence of how the children are involved in a meaningful way? Have you considered creating a participation folder? And that's sort of a big favourite of mine, because it's really given children ownership of how they record and gather evidence of their play experiences. So within a participation folder, I would be looking for things like, how do they feed into the plans? Where's the evidence? Photographs of maybe a suggestion tree where they've stuck their ideas on. What do the kids think of the play? How do you gather evidence of them monitoring and evaluating it? That would be in your folder. And also the things that they've loved about it and their successes, and maybe something they've made or they've created that they want to share and keep, can also be put in and kept within the folder. So it ends up a lovely piece of informative work. For your physical environment, loose parts. What can I say? Loose parts are our most favourite type of resource for lots of reasons, and cost effectiveness of them, but as well as that, their open-ended play value. Loose parts create richer environments for children to play in, giving them the resources they need to do with what they want to do. They can move them about, build, construct, roll, sit on. Static, unchanging play spaces do little for children, whereas environments which can be manipulated, where things can be moved, open worlds of possibilities for play. You need to consider storage systems that enable independent access for the children. So you're going to possibly have to have some sort of storage arrangement for your all your resources for your individual play pods. When program planning, consider both the indoor and the outdoor environments. I always believe anything that you can do indoors can be carried out outdoors, only they can be messier, noisier, faster, and louder when they're outside. So physical activity, Bernadette mentioned at the Children's and Young People's Survey that some of the findings showed children's lack of physical activity and physical play during lockdown. So we want our kids to be physical. We want to promote physical activity when they come to our clubs. Ensuring that there's space for them to do this is crucial. And with regards to smaller groups and children confined within their play pods, there's lots of little games that you can play that don't need a lot of equipment. Example, tennis, junior golf, running, jumping, skipping, bowling, chalking, and many of the other street games or traditional games, stuck in the mud, 1, 2, 3 red lights, Queenie-O, could all be used in your club. They all can also be adopted for the small number of children within your pods. I think I've repeated myself there. Have a simple supply of equipment and things to play with that can be easily cleaned after use or disposed of. If they're loose parts or recycled things, once a play pod's finished with them, if you can't clean them, you might want to just get rid of them. Where possible, provide children with their own resources to revisit if they wish, in the likes of basins, plastic trays, or cotton bags of goodies for children maybe with additional needs who like their own preferred toys and equipment. So there's just some of the ideas, both indoors and outdoors, that loose parts lend themselves for. Very open-ended. And again, this is just to try and reinforce the message of don't do away with the variety of play that we would usually have within your settings. I always sort of use the 16 play types to help me monitor and check if I would have, you know, a broad enough variety for choice. So again, I'm not going to read all these out, but indoors you would usually have imaginary tabletop activity, somewhere to relax, an arts and crafts table, etc. Extend that type of thinking out whenever you're thinking about your outdoors, and try to create the same little play zones or play stations if you're short of space in your outdoor area. And you could also add in messy sensory activities and make sure there's somewhere to chill out and social zone out there as well if kids want to relax while they're outside. Is your outdoor play area a child-friendly space? Does it look like somewhere where kids want to go out and play? So maybe the use of bunting and colourful things, children's artwork, wind chimes, all that sort of thing could be added to just give it a more child-friendly look if you're contained in a uninspiring space. The use of tires and are brilliant for if you want to add them for small world play, for sensory play, to hold water if you're going to give kids water pistols or squirty bottles. And then I'm just going to share some photographs with you of some of the activities that children can do when they're outdoors using loose parts. Dam building, music stations, great for if you want to create runners for trucks and cars. Portable, self-made, messy kitchens, sensey kitchens, small world play. And then the natural environment, if you're lucky enough to have access to a green space within your grounds or close to your setting, use it. And the natural green spaces offer so much value for play. Money couldn't buy it. So the role of the play worker. The play worker's core function is to create an environment which will stimulate children's play and maximise the opportunity for a wide range of play opportunities. Try to take a playful approach based on responding to children's needs and wishes. And I know I'm speaking to the converted here when I talk about the role of the play workers, and with some fantastic play workers in our membership. But sometimes with the stress maybe and the pressure of reopening and having to put all the other things in place, we just need a little reminder about who we are. Ask the children to come up with their own games and allow them to change the environment for their play. So even if they're in a restricted space, make sure that by the use of loose parts or other equipment, kids can change it to suit and meet their own play needs. So key points from today's session. The guidelines have been changing rapidly. As practitioners, you should be visiting the websites regularly for updates. Working from the minimum standards remains a legal requirement. When children return to the settings, they need to be able to reap the therapeutic benefits that play brings and rebuild their connections with others. So allowing them time. Some children may have experienced difficult situations at home and may require further support to deal with social and emotional issues. You may see some unwanted behaviours. Just have empathy and have conversations with the kids, because we don't know what has went on in their little lives in your absence. It is widely recognised that the risk of infection is reduced outdoors, so if there is an outdoor area available, it should be utilised as much as possible. And with the constraints you are working from, play is your most useful resource. Make best use of it, and remember, have fun. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Sinead. If you would mind just stop sharing your screen. And I will now invite our panel, which is Sinead, Bridge and Kathy, to unmute yourselves and switch your videos on for questions. Thank you all again for engaging in the chat and sharing some of the practice that you're using in your settings. It's really, really nice to see some ways that your staff are getting creative with the restrictions that are in place. Just waiting on Kathy.
I'm here.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Kathy. Okay, I've been looking at some of the questions and I'm going to start with you, Kathy, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
So, do you have any advice for settings in managing pods where children attend on a part-time basis?
Okay, so I think all the trusts recognise and the department recognise that there will be children attending on a part-time basis. So as long as it's really the same children going into the same pod every day, if that makes sense. So depending on your setting, you may only have one pod, you may only have one room, and you may well have part-time children that come. That's okay. It's the same children coming in to the same group. If you had 2 pods in a room, again, you may have part-time children attending. As long as it's the same children going in to the same pod every time. So I suppose in other words, what you don't want is a crisscrossing over. So for example, you know, if you had 2 children in pod 1 on a Monday and a Tuesday, you would want those children to always go into pod 1 on a Monday and a Tuesday. You wouldn't want them, for example, next week, maybe going into pod, you know, another pod. So that's the general rule. You know, there's absolutely no problem with children coming on a part-time basis, or children coming maybe for a morning, or children coming for an afternoon, as long as, you know, whoever's, you know, managing the setting tries to ensure that it's always going to be the same children going in to the same pod. And the same for staff as well. You know, staff will work on a part-time basis as well. So again, same sort of rule applies, you know, as long as it's tends to be the same staff working as much as possible in the same pod. Obviously, there's going to be those circumstances where there are going to be exceptions sometimes. You know, if staff are sick or ill or unable to come in, and you know, there's going to be possibly some crossover between pods, but in as far as possible we try to minimize that. So does that
thank you very much, Kathy? That's perfect. Bridge, I'm going to hand the next one over to you, and it was to do with children's sensory needs and how we would best meet those if we were removing, for example, our sand or water trays.
Well, I suppose if we do risk assessments, we can, you know, individual children, you know, can a wee sort of container with sand or water, or you know, maybe if you know, PlayBoard have they have a publication supporting children with additional needs through play, and there are lots of sensory activities in that. If you go on the website, you'll be able to see them. But I think at this point, I think it's probably individual, and as long as it's risk assessed and the resources aren't shared, you know, that's where we are at the minute with the sensory play. Of course, you still have you know, your you know, things that you do with your lighting, or the other thing too is sensory boxes are really good. If a child has a sensory box, a personal sensory box, but we would have done that in our after schools anyway, you know, if they, you know, felt maybe stressed or anxious, they know where that is. They can go and lift that and they can play with that themselves. You know, we fiddle toys, fidget toys and stuff like that. So there's a few things that we can, you know, we can still do within the pods.
That's great. Thank you very much, Bridge. Kathy, it's back to you now. And this is a question that's come in a couple of times. It's where can settings source partitions for the pods?
Okay. Wish I knew the answer to that one, actually. And that is something that's asked a lot. The guidance isn't as clear as it could be, I have to say, on this. in that, you know, it talks about the need for partitions. And the only reference to any type of description of a partition is when they talk about using a clear screen made of perspex. But there's no real detail given about types of partitions, how they could be made. They actually say they don't, you know, it is really up to providers to decide what's going to work best in their setting. And I think so. It's very difficult. It's very difficult to say. All I would say to settings is look at your own setting. Look at your room. And look at, you know, how you think, you know, if you're going to have 2 pods and so you're going to need a divide, can you have a clear divide? Is that something that you can do? So you can look at that. If you can't have a clear divide, then you're going to need to look then at other sort of physical partitions. And so what I would say is, you know, I think it's probably better that, you know, staff in settings come up with the best ideas themselves. The guidance is very, I mean, as long as it's a partition of sufficient height, and I think the guidance says it should be sufficient height as in the height of the tallest person in the room. So again, they don't define the exact height, what it should be, but they do say it should be as tall as the highest person. So as long as it's of sufficient height, as long as it meets health and safety requirements, as in, you know, it's not that flimsy that it's going to fall over, for example, and cause injury to someone. So it needs to be, you know, secure enough to stand on its own, of sufficient height, and high, you know, people have come up with, I've seen some really good examples. People have come up with some really ingenious ideas. Some people have put bookcases in place. Some people have put other sort of office type sort of divide screens in place. Other people have used, I've seen actually a sort of like a gazebo, a side of a gazebo, you know, quite big. Do you know the sort of thing I mean, where there's kind of like windows in it as well, but it's kind of like a gazebo type of thing, and I've seen that used across the room, and that's quite a good idea actually, as long as I say it can be sort of secured in some way. So there are lots of ideas out there. The trusts aren't getting into kind of telling people what to do, because again, it's very much dependent on your own setting, you know, and what's going to work best for you and what's going to be realistic. Ideally, you can do, it should be something that's not going to cost money. And I know that is a challenge for people in terms of thinking, how can we do these partitions and keep our costs down, you know? So yeah, that's, you know, I suppose it's up to people to maybe think about that one, you know, and talk to their link social workers, talk to their early years teams, and say, look, this is the idea that I have, this is what I'm proposing to do. Do you think that'd be okay, or whatever, you know? So if you're not sure, definitely speak to your social workers around that.
Thank you, Kathy. That's really useful for a lot of our groups here today. Sinead, I'm going to direct the next question to you, if that's okay. Someone would love to get their younger children engaged with the monitoring and evaluating of play, and they were wondering if you have any ideas on how they could do that.
Yes, we have some templates here that I would be willing to share if anybody wants to contact with me. Informal discussions would be the way I would do it with the younger kids. But I also have a template for capturing, you know, what they like about something, what they don't like, or their favourite place to play is. But usually I would or get them to take photographs is another great one. If you have cameras in your setting, letting them take pictures of what they like to do, or where their favourite place is to play. And then you can add those photographs into your participation folder. But there's lots of templates as well for gathering evidence as well from your older kids. So if you're interested and you want me to share them, just email me. Sonny.mccosker@playboard.co.uk.
Thank you, Sinead. That's really, really helpful. Breed, this is another one for you. So are children allowed to take home any items that they've made in the setting, or do they have to be held back for 72 hours?
Okay. Well, that's one that I'll say I don't know the definitive answer. I know that some groups that are open have allowed the art to go back, but they're still not sure whether it's okay to do that. So I don't know, Catherine, do Do you know a definitive answer for that one? You know, can the children's artwork be taken home?
I think, well, there's actually nothing really written down on this in the guidance, but I would think that the most sensible answer to that one is probably not, because what is in the pod should remain in the pod. So any resources, you know, play items, stuff that's done should remain in the pod. And again, that's really just to minimize, you know, any cross infection. So anything that be, you know, leaving that pod, going out, you know, out into the community, out into somebody's home, whatever. So it's probably,
if nothing comes into the pod, then nothing should come out of the pod.
Yeah, really. What happens in the pod stays in the pod. You know what I mean? So yeah, and I think as well, you know, if you know, I know parents do like to get stuff home that children have made. Of course they do, and children love bringing stuff home. But I suppose it's a different way we're working now, and you know, it may well be that, for example, maybe the staff could maybe, you know, be taking photographs of work that's completed, or artwork, stuff that's been done. So I suppose it's how we use our technology maybe better. So, you know, maybe taking photographs and sending those photographs home or whatever to parents. So at least, you know, parents can say, oh gosh, no, this is lovely, this is what's been made. But I just do think that probably just due to, you know, infection control, probably should remain in the pod. You know,
that's a super answer. And I know, Kathy, just on top of that, that there are some apps out there which would be really helpful, including Seesaw for parents to get involved and for messages to be sent directly to them. So that would be helpful. Kathy, I'm going to come back to you now. Someone has put in a question about children from different schools. Are they allowed to be in the same pod? Are they allowed to be transported together to the setting? What do you know about that?
So, okay, so is this, are you thinking about when children are back in school and they're coming to the after school group after school?
I'm assuming so, yeah, it's including schools.
Yeah. Again, I suppose we're you know, again, we're moving into a new situation, and we really haven't had that because obviously a lot of our schools have been closed. Again, my advice would be that if you're collecting children from school, if you can walk children, ideally that's probably better. If you're using transport, transport is allowed. You know, children are allowed to be in transport. But again, part of your risk assessment, you would need to show, you know, how children are going to be accommodated safely, what vehicles will be used, the vehicles obviously be cleaned after use, all of that. I think it's probably sensible that children, you know, would be collected in a small group, brought back to the setting. Ideally, they're the same children going into the same pod, but that might not be the case. So again, I think we have to be realistic. We know that there, for example, part-time children attend settings and come in at different times of the day and the week. So likewise, same sort of rule applies. Children will be coming from school as a group and will be entering, again, it's when they get to the setting, they do need to still go into the same pods that they've been in previously. So that's, you know, that is the general rule. But yes, they can be transported safely, and all vehicles need to be properly risk assessed and cleaned, and all of that, you know. So
that's great. Thank you. Breach, this is one for you. Do you have any ideas on how to discuss the pandemic with children so that you have that balance of not scaring them, but at the same time ensuring that they know it's serious? Sorry, Breach, can't hear you.
I actually muted myself because there's a guy out cutting the grass.
Oh no.
No, they're really good social stories, you know, out there. There's really good posters out there, and I suppose being sensible. A lot of the children know about the epidemic anyway because they've been at home and their parents have discussed it with them. So I think for maybe for bringing them back into the after schools, I think it would be a good idea. If the staff from the after schools could maybe you know, do a video and a walk around and how the changes are. And, you know, obviously keeping it upbeat and positive, because a lot of children are going to be a wee bit worried about coming back anyway, you know, and about passing, maybe catching COVID or passing it back to their parents. So it's really just, I think it's up to each individual after schools, you know, to to work with their children, talk with their children. The posters are great. I've seen some really fantastic posters, and the social stories are very, very good. I think I put up a couple of places where you can get the social stories. The Parent and the NI has a lot of stuff on there as well.
Perfect, thank you very much. Sinead, I'm going to pass this one to you. What activities would be best for the mixed age ranges then within the pods?
Probably a mix of resources. If you think of loose parts, that's why we love them so much, because of their resourcefulness, and that any age can play with them. The older children will play with them in different ways, and the younger ones will, as well as that, some having a good few games up your sleeve. I always think that kids will play within the environment and choose their preferred activity. So if it's construction or sensory or physical play, they'll do that independently. But if I wanted to mix kids in an activity, I would organise a game or even pull in a big skipping rope out. Automatically, adults would have like a group of kids straight over at you. And the likes of the stuck in the mud and other traditional games is a good way. A parachute's another great one, but we mightn't be allowed to use that just yet. But things like that, where you're bringing a group of kids together for a game, I would recommend. Brilliant. One of our biggest asked questions, by the way, in PlayBoard or when we're doing training, is trying to engage our older children. And that brings us straight back a bit about the participation stuff. If children are feeding into your plans, they're giving you ideas of things that they're interested in. So that's probably one of the best tips that we could give you. Thanks.
That's great. Thank you very much. Breach, this is back to you again. Do you have any advice for further supporting children with additional needs in transitioning back to the setting?
Sorry about the background noise here, but I think about what I said before, about, having a video, a video of the setting, and, I think and sending it home to the parents. But I think that's it. It's as long as the children are comfortable, because obviously you'll know, that you'll all know your own children with the additional needs. You'll know how they are. You could do a visit, obviously a social distancing visit, inviting them back or talking to them. I don't know if you've been on any social media. Some of the groups have kept the contact going through social media. So that's another way as well, through Facebook, doing activities with the kids that way. But I think really, if the kids notice that, and if you let them know, where they're coming back to, and try and keep things as normal whenever they are there. And the stuff that, maybe the wee boxes that they had beforehand, keep them in their pod, let them know where everything is, because, and especially, let them know what's coming up as well. It's really important that they're involved and they know exactly what's going to be happening within the pod.
Definitely. I think what's key there is consistency.
Yeah, it is, try and keep it as it was before as best you can.
And there's a publication due to be released from PlayBoard on children with additional needs, isn't there?
Yes, I mentioned that one earlier. It's the Supporting Children with Additional Needs Through Play. It's very good. You can get that on the website.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. So our PlayBoard website has that. Thank you very much. Kathy, just back to you then. Do you have any advice on how to support staff who are anxious about returning to their setting?
I suppose really, yeah. I mean, I think the trusts all recognise that it's going to be an anxious time for everyone, for the staff, children and the parents. I suppose really this is where it's really down to the managers, the leaders in settings to be, I suppose, meeting with their staff probably in advance of them starting back, and having those conversations about what sorts of things it is that staff are anxious about. So I think having very clear, I suppose, structures in place would be really important. I think so that staff are fully aware of what their role and their responsibility is going to be. So just having very, very clear, structured, clear policies in place. I also think staff as well, maybe going through the guidance with the staff and picking out the key points so that all the staff are aware of the sorts of things that they need to be doing, and be mindful of. All staff have access to the online training as well around COVID. But yeah, it's just really about having conversations with staff, because everyone will have their own I suppose, individual questions or maybe anxieties or, fears about maybe going back into the play environments. So I think it's useful to have those meetings, and to have those meetings on a regular basis, I have to say. And whether that, we're on a Zoom today, and again, the use of technology is good for these things. It doesn't necessarily have to be face-to-face meetings. We have Zoom meetings with people, email, even telephone, conversations with people, just to keep communication open. I think is really important, and I think that's going to be the key thing going forward. As the guidance becomes updated, as things change, it's really, really important that, managers, leaders have that ongoing communication with their staff team, and maybe set up, forums or WhatsApps within the team so that people can communicate regularly, seek reassurance, seek clarity around issues if they're uncertain. So it is an uncertain world, there's no doubt about that, and it's going to be a very different way of working, and people are going to be anxious. I think there needs to be a recognition and acknowledgement of that. I think even the trusts are not expecting, everything to just get back to normal. It's not going to be back to normal in the way that we know it's a kind of new normal. It's a new way of working. So absolutely, those are real feelings that people have. And it's really, really important that they're acknowledged and that they're addressed, and that there are solutions, and that there are practical things put in place so that, that staff can, if they have a question, if they have an issue, or if they're in work for, a week and they go home and things have been great, but suddenly, they may suddenly become anxious about a particular situation. It's really, really important that they have those opportunities to speak to their other staff, or their leaders or the managers, or contact the early years team as well, within your trust. Any issues that you feel uncertain about, or at any time if you feel you're uncomfortable or whatever that is, the early years team is there as well, just trying to help answer any queries or any wee questions that you might have in relation to those matters. So
thank you very much, Kathy. That'll be all the questions we have time for today, everyone. So thank you, panel, for answering them. That was really, really helpful. Just before you go now, I have talked about the pack previously. So I'm just going to show you now before, Jimmy's just shared it with you. I'm just going to show you how you can then access it. So when you get the pack, it will take you to a website that looks just like this. Sorry, let me extend that. And you will be able to view all of the documents. I hope you can all see this at the minute. And you will be able to view them. You can double click them. That will let you view them. And then there's a little arrow at the top right hand where you can download them then onto your computers. Please don't feel rushed to get these all downloaded now on the Zoom meeting. I will be sending these all through to you afterwards during via email. So please don't feel rushed. I know some people are accessing this via iPads and phones and won't be able to do it right now, but I will be sending it out afterwards via email so you can get it all then again. I know that Angela has put up in the chat that we will be sharing some of the cluster groups that we have that would maybe be beneficial for you. So I will get those added to it at some point next week, and I'll let you know whenever that's added. I would just like to finish off by saying thank you so much to everybody for attending, and thank you to our panel for coming and answering all of your questions, and Sinead for presenting. We would like to wish you all the very best as you start to reopen your settings, and please don't hesitate to get in touch with PlayBoard if we can help you in any other way. The best way for you all to keep up to date with some webinars or events that are coming up with us is to follow us on our social media platforms such as Twitter or Facebook, and to look on our website. Thank you all again, and take care. I hope you can all access that. Please email me if you can't. I will be sending out by email again, and please check all of your folders in case it's went into your spam folder. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
thank you.